From the world of politics to the world of business, this is Balance of Power. Live from Washington, D.C.
From Bloomberg's Washington, D.C. studios to our TV and radio audiences worldwide, welcome to Balance of Power. Alongside Joe Matthew, I'm Kailey Leinz.
Tonight, the growing rift between Elon Musk and the president bursts into a public war of words.
I was very surprised. You saw the words he had for me, the words of, and he hasn't said anything about me that's bad. I'd rather have him criticize me than the bill, because the bill is incredible.
The Trump-Musk alliance that kicked off the president's second term is apparently no more after a series of searing posts from Musk today and public comments from the president following Musk's opposition to the one big beautiful bill the president talks about. Trump now openly targeting Musk's U.S. contracts and government subsidies.
The impact of that rift now being felt across Washington and on Wall Street as Tesla stock takes a nosedive today, the biggest drop in 4 years.
Yeah, the questions being asked on Capitol Hill with Musk loyal staffers at the DOGE retaining their access to extensive government documents and sensitive personal data of millions.
Plus, what this all means for the tax bill when we speak with Senate Banking Committee Chairman Tim Scott and Democratic Senator Catherine Cortez Masto up ahead.
That's where we begin tonight, with that growing rift between President Trump and Elon Musk still unfolding before our eyes, boiling over today before the cameras for the world to see. An incredible moment in the Oval Office today as the president responded in real time to direct criticism from his one-time confidant, Elon Musk, as he sat across from German Chancellor Friedrich Merz.
I've always liked Elon, and I was very surprised. You saw the words he had for me, the words of, and he hasn't said anything about me that's bad. I'd rather have him criticize me than the bill, because the bill is incredible. Elon's upset because we took the EV mandate, and which was a lot of money for electric vehicles, and they're having a hard time, the electric vehicles. I know that it disturbed him. He wanted, and rightfully, he recommended somebody from that he, I guess, knew very well. I'm sure he respected him, but to run NASA, and I didn't think it was appropriate.
The president followed up those comments with a handful of Truth Social posts saying Musk was, quote, wearing thin and that he asked him to leave the administration. Then posting this blockbuster of a threat, quote, the easiest way to save money in our budget, billions and billions of dollars, is to terminate Elon's governmental subsidies and contracts. Musk responding by saying, quote, in light of the president's statement about cancellation of my government contracts, SpaceX will begin decommissioning its Dragon spacecraft immediately. We're covering every angle of this story at this hour with our Bloomberg reporters. Ted Mann is here with us in Washington, Max Chafkin and Romaine Bostick at Bloomberg World Headquarters in New York. Ed Ludlow will join us from San Francisco as well. But we want to get things started with Ted and Max. Max, obviously you follow Elon Musk incredibly closely. How should we consider the speed with which this particular spat has escalated?
I mean, this has been an explosive day. Even if you're used to Elon Musk and his propensity for having these blow-ups, same thing with Donald Trump, the way that these guys went from being incredibly close allies, as recently as a few weeks ago to this situation is staggering, and it's going to affect the Republican Party and Donald Trump. And of course, it's going to affect some of the largest companies in the world. And you're seeing that in the Tesla stock price. I'm sure that at SpaceX, there is also a lot of agita, even though it's not a publicly traded company. This is hugely destabilizing.
Yeah, Ted, this is wild. Elon Musk tweeting earlier that the president of the United States is in the Epstein files. This doom scroll is something that you've been looking at throughout the day. You specialize in covering wealth and power. How do either of these men slow down, considering the vast resources they have and the sensitive personalities that come with them?
I think the sensitive personalities is probably the more important point right now. Neither one of these guys is someone who likes to de-escalate or to walk away from a fight. And that's why, in some ways, we've been anticipating a moment like this almost since they first began this strange partnership last year.
Well, and we should keep in mind that it was only, July, in the aftermath of the assassination attempt that President Trump, that this whole thing started in the first place, and Musk started deploying his massive pile of capital in not just Trump's electoral effort, but for Republicans across the board. What happens if that money is not deployed in the same way for Republicans in 2026? How much do they need his funding?
I think it will matter a lot if this affects people, obviously up in the midterms, and also sort of depends on what sort of vengeance Musk might have in mind. Some of the comments last night seemed to suggest that he wanted to penalize those who had voted for the bill that he has turned against, which might be good news if you are a right-wing candidate in a Republican primary, and bad news if you're an incumbent who voted for it. But we don't quite know how seriously to take that threat or what it could ultimately mean.
Max, you're the closest thing to our Elon Musk whisperer. A lot has been said about his personal life recently. A lot has been written about his purported drug use, some of which he has addressed. I don't believe we've seen him today, have we? Do we know where he is and what he's going through?
I don't know where he is. I mean, there have been, even before these reports about drug use, real questions, some of which were, seeded by Elon Musk himself about his sort of mental health. He's talked about dealing with bouts of depression. You do sense an out of control moment here. And all along, I've been watching this thinking, okay, can they reconcile? Because it really seems like, especially in Elon Musk's interest, to find a way back. It's not clear, there is the possibility that he could fund right-wing challengers to Republicans who voted for this. There's even the possibility he teased it, a third party or whatever. But it's hard to see where his home is if it isn't with Donald Trump, just because he's so effectively alienated everybody else. We've seen Democrats get so angry at Elon Musk. He's become basically a symbol for everything that they see as wrong with the Donald Trump administration. So yeah, it just seems tough. And then you're seeing one sort of tweet after another, pressing buttons that it almost feels like are going to be difficult to unpress.
Well, and when we consider everything Elon Musk is trying to do, Ted, do we have any sense as to whether or not where this effort all started, which is killing the reconciliation bill, if this actually has any influence on that whatsoever?
Well, I mean, it does seem that there were cracks in the facade going back a few weeks, even a few months. I mean, there have been moments where Musk was gently critical of tariffs, for instance. That's Trump's favorite tool of all. There have been other instances where he has signaled slight disagreement. There have been instances where Trump himself, for instance, told a cabinet meeting, don't worry, you're still in charge of your agencies, despite DOGE running rampant across everything. So there have been signs that it was not all completely hunky-dory. I do think the question now is why exactly in this moment they each chose to escalate it to this degree.
The question we're all asking this evening. Bloomberg's Ted Mann and Max Chafkin, thank you both so much for joining us. And joining us now for even more is the host of Bloomberg Technology, Ed Ludlow, who is out in San Francisco. Ed, earlier today, we had a note out from J.P. Morgan talking about this bill that Elon Musk obviously wants to kill could have a hit to Tesla of $1.2 billion with the cutting out of EV subsidies for cars like Tesla. But Tesla had an even worse day today because of this feud between Musk and Trump. Is Musk just digging the hole deeper for his automaker?
Yeah, I heard what Max Chafkin said, pressing buttons that can't be unpressed, metaphorically, so to speak. I mean, the important bit to understand that with Tesla at one point in the session being down 18%, which is the biggest drop, or at one point putting it on track for the biggest drop in 4 years, is a part of what we were calling the Trump trade. In other words, prior to the election in November, Tesla would trade to the upside simply on the logic that Elon Musk's positive relationship with the President of the United States would work in the company's favor, because it would open doors to a legislative pathway that would be supportive of Tesla's future ambitions. Let me give you an example. On Friday, we broke the story right that Elon Musk and Tesla staffers were themselves proactively lobbying on the robotaxi or autonomous driving legislation that is currently working its way through Congress. As you guys know, there is a recess July 4th. My understanding from sources is there was huge energy and impetus to get some progress done in Tesla's favor in that bill prior to the recess. Clearly, the breakdown or deterioration in the relationship between the president and Musk puts that policy effort as one example into doubt.
Great reporting, Ed. Nobody covers Tesla like you do, or SpaceX for that matter, and I'm wondering what you're hearing from shareholders, what the thought is. There was some excitement a couple of weeks ago when Elon Musk said he was coming home. He was going to be sleeping on the floor at work, getting things back together. When you see a spiral like this, obviously the stock reaction is very real. What's the sentiment among shareholders who thought they were finally out of the woods?
Yeah, I mean, I've spoken to quite a few investors, both in public Tesla, but actually more so in private SpaceX. And it's very much like we are scrolling our phones just like everyone else and buckle up and buckle in, and this is going to be a ride. The important thing is to understand through Tesla as a publicly traded proxy for Elon Inc., but also SpaceX, that both of those companies have financial exposure to the United States government, more so SpaceX. And it's not just NASA funding or grants for longer-term projects. It is the relationship with the defense apparatus of this country, where billions of dollars go to SpaceX to put defense-related satellites into orbit for the DOD and the Pentagon and such like that. And, you know, all I'm doing is summarizing what the president said, canceling those government contracts, and what Elon Musk has now responded with, saying that he will decommission the Dragon program. For your audience, the Dragon is the capsule atop of the SpaceX rocket that takes humans and cargo to and from the International Space Station.
We're going to have more of a conversation about that later in the hour and exactly what this could mean for our space program. Ed Ludlow, thank you so much, the host of Bloomberg Technology, working overtime on this breaking news Thursday. And for a look now at the market impact, we want to focus more closely on the fallout on Wall Street. We turn to world headquarters in New York and Bloomberg's Romaine Bostick. It's hard to downplay the reaction here, Romaine.
We should point out, I mean, Tesla is the 10th highest weighted company in the S&P 500. So if it has a big drop like it did today, well, that's going to drag down the whole market. Remember, on an intraday basis, this was the worst day for Tesla going back to 2020. And I just want to point also the volume on this. The volume was astonishing. You had something about 280 million shares swap hands. The last time we saw that type of volume, you had to go all the way back to early 2023. That was, to be precise, January 30th, 2023. And that was when Ford announced it was cutting the price on its Mach-E, basically a price war with Tesla. So investors typically don't react that same way with this stock, the way that we saw today. And that's going to be a big factor. A stock that closed below all of its key moving averages, the 100-day, the 200-day, the 50-day, you name it. It's under it. And it's raising a lot of questions about leadership. Joe, we had Ross Gerber, who's a big investor in Tesla, who has been whittling away his stake in that company for quite some time, largely because of his concern about management of this company and whether they need new leadership.
Well, Romaine, when we get back to the fundamentals of, aside from the EV credit, what Elon Musk has been trying to argue over the last several days that has led to this massive explosion in his relationship with Trump, he's arguing that this is a deficit problem and that Congress is going to bankrupt the country, that there is fiscal concern here. Are we still seeing evidence of that concern across financial markets?
100%. Musk can be right and wrong at the same time, and he's certainly right on that point here. You have a bond market that has shown skittishness, a bond market that effectively has said, look, we're going to stay short duration. Just to put that into perspective, basically what they're saying is, look, we'll buy treasuries, but only for maybe 2, 3 to 5 years out. We don't trust buying 10, 20, 30 years out because we are concerned about what the debt servicing costs are going to be and what the impact will be on the economy. They're basically take a look at a 30-year yield at 4.9%, a 10-year yield at 4.4, Kailey, and essentially what they're saying is, we'll buy this if you pay us more. Basically, we need additional yield. Citigroup strategists earlier this week put a price tag on that, and they said at least a 0.5 percentage point on the long end of the curve to entice people to continue buying this. You're not really seeing that. You have some big auctions next week. You have a big Fed meeting coming up in about a week and a half. It'll be interesting to see how they react to any changes there.
Indeed. All right. Bloomberg's Romaine Bostick live for us at World Headquarters in New York. Thank you so much. And still ahead, we'll have more on this rapidly escalating feud between President Trump and Elon Musk and Musk's threat to decommission SpaceX's Dragon spacecraft that ferries cargo and people to the International Space Station. We'll discuss with Keith Cowling, editor at NASA Watch, next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio.
He created the first major American car company in generations, and his rocket company is the only reason we can now send American astronauts into space. Come here. Take over, Elon. Yes, take over.
That was then candidate Donald Trump and Elon Musk on the campaign trail last fall. And now, amid the escalating days-long spat between Musk and Trump, Musk says he's going to decommission SpaceX's Dragon spacecraft that ferries cargo and people to the International Space Station and back. Joining us now for a closer look at the implications here on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio is Keith Cowing, editor at NASA Watch. Keith, Musk says that's what he'll do in response to President Trump threatening to cancel government contracts related to Elon Musk, assumedly inclusive of his efforts with space in particular. But if they actually decommission the Dragon, how will those astronauts on the ISS currently ever get back?
Well, you had three smart financial guys ahead of me, so I don't have to talk about that. I will give you the rocket scientists' response to what you just said. The Home Alone kid. I mean, really? I don't know what else to say. I mean, it's like America really does rely on this rocket to get its astronauts up and back, and all these other things, the commercial satellites at DOD, and he's just going to start turning things off because of a food fight with the President of the United States. Okay, didn't expect that news today.
For our radio audience, I should note, Keith just made a very terrified
that was pretty
face
effective.
on our air. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, Home Alone 4, I guess, is what we have here. I don't even know what to ask, to be really honest here, Keith. How about we just get to procedure? We're always interested in policy here on Bloomberg. Does he have the legal grounds to do this? Can he just pull the plug on this spacecraft?
In a normal universe where you know, but in the one we're in now, where the president can seemingly exercise unusual abilities to turn universities off and to make agencies disappear, they may try to do this. This would be very injurious to America's commercial space sector, and more so eventually to the defense industry. So I don't know, perhaps somebody will talk him out of this. Maybe they'll go have lunch. I don't know. But I would be very surprised if what both men are saying will actually come to pass.
Okay, well, fair enough. If it does, though, is there any private or public entity that is able to fill the SpaceX void, Keith?
No. This is a one. There's no backup here. There's no other way to get people into space that's even going to be functional for many years from now. So this is a one-trick pony. You tell it to go away, and you're not going to get people going up to the space station. And once they come home, that's it. Unless we go with the Russians, and that's not exactly an option these days.
Oh, well. That would be an interesting part of this program. We know that Elon Musk has spent quite a bit of time talking to Vladimir Putin over the last year. With that said, though, does this help to preserve the Artemis program? Does Boeing have a new leg up in the space business?
Well, the Boeing spacecraft has so many problems. I really doubt that they would, if SpaceX suddenly said we're not flying Dragons, that they would just go to the Boeing spacecraft, because they already have issues with that. So that's a non-starter. Okay. Buying some seats in the Soyuz spacecraft, we have a couple of Americans going up. That's only a trickle to what we would have. Wow. But add in the fact that this administration is now dialing down the space station's utilization, and they want to cancel a bunch of other stuff. So this is a big hornet's nest. I mean, you've really poked at it from 10 different directions in this online food fight. I suspect that when it settles out, they will move on to bigger things that they can argue with each other about.
Well, when we consider bigger things, Keith, if this doesn't get sorted out quickly, how far does it set back efforts to get to Mars?
Well, apparently right now the thought is when you say go to Mars, and Elon Musk's name is in the same sentence, that we're talking about the Starship, the giant rocket that they're launching from Florida. Those launches are controlled to some extent by the FAA, and the guy at the FAA works for Mr. Trump, so he could just say, no more of that. And they're going to use one of these SpaceX Starships to land on the moon. He could say, well, we don't want to do that. I'm sure Elon would like to go to Mars on his own dime, but get government funding for the rest of it. Mr. Trump could say, no, we're not going to do that. Mr. Bezos, my new friend, is. I don't know. This is all, who knows?
Underscoring the need for answers. Keith Cowing, editor at NASA Watch. Keith, thank you for the insights here. I want to take a look at the potential national security implications of this fallout. And for help, we turn to Denver Riggleman, the former Republican congressman from Virginia, retired Air Force intelligence officer, now CEO at the company Rig. It's great to see you, Denver. Welcome back to Bloomberg TV and radio. I know you just returned from a trip to Ukraine, and we welcome you back safely to the USA. You have a broad view of this, knowing that Elon Musk is not only the richest man in the world, he's a very clever guy, and he's deeply resourced when it comes to sensitive information here in Washington, D.C. How bad could this get?
Very bad. You know, I was worried about this a while ago, as you know, Joe, and you have somebody who had access, right, to secrets, to things in the United States government that a lot of people don't have access to, especially when it comes to the space program. But you're looking at all the things that he was briefed on, especially with Russia, with threat systems there. You wonder what he's going to do. He seems to be, you know, fairly unstable or angry right now. So we have the world's richest man and the world's most powerful man, you know, staging this bizarre rant, you know, on social media, which is incredibly unserious. And when you look at Donald Trump and already his issues with national security and what's happened with him, you look at what's going on with Elon Musk, you're looking at what's going on around the world globally, you look at what's happening in Ukraine. You know, what frightens me is that we are so incredibly unserious that secrets will get out, but also that really the very fabric of our foreign policy and how we deal with allies could be threatened based on what we're seeing right now.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so who has the greatest reason for concern when we think about where Starlink is deployed around the world? What information has been shared with Elon Musk? As we know, he has been on calls with various world leaders over the time. President Trump has been either the president-elect or president a second time. Denver, where do you look and feel most worried?
I'm most worried about, you know, our foreign policy. Kailey, your question was so prescient. That's where I was going with Ukraine with Starlink. You were on top of it. You know, my biggest worry is what type of data transfers are looking at there, what he can do with Starlink. But it could go the other way, too, right, Kailey? It could be that actually Starlink becomes more of a stable force in Ukraine based on what we're seeing right now, because Elon is obviously breaking from Trump at record speed. You know, I wouldn't even be surprised if Elon removes President Trump from X right here shortly. I think that's another thing that we're going to see. So I think we have all that happening in real time. But what you're seeing overseas, what you're seeing with the communication lines, because it's not just, you know, SpaceX, it is Starlink, but it's also Tesla. You also have all the other things that Elon is involved with, especially with AI. What contracts does he have in AI that's already being utilized for intelligence? You're looking at the connections with Palantir. You're looking at the connections with Anduril. You're looking at all these connections that are happening in real time with people that have been cleared just based on the fact of who they are and not going through proper vetting. So again, with somebody who's been in this space a long time and has seen about everything, I don't know if we can even predict the awful cascading effect. And I'm going to look right in the camera and say this. I think we're in deep trouble. I think we're in really deep trouble when you have somebody this rich and then somebody this powerful on both sides going at it like this in such an unserious and infantile manner. America looks like a global joke, and I think, you know, our adversaries will take advantage of that.
Well, that's a lot, Denver. As we mentioned, you just got back from Ukraine, and we know that Elon Musk has been in touch with Vladimir Putin for the last 2 years. That was something that emerged toward the end of the presidential campaign, that they had repeated phone calls. If Elon Musk is on the outs with President Trump, do you worry about that relationship blossoming and what it would mean for Ukraine?
Of course, you know, and that's what, you know, man, questions are great. Joe, you know, my worry there is, like I said, it might go the other way, but, you know, obviously he does have the phone number for Vladimir Putin. I am worried about Ukraine just being over there, seeing drone warfare happening in real time. You know, I was in Kherson, I was in Odessa, I was in Mykolaiv, I was with some of the most brave and incredible people you can imagine. And right now there's a stalemate on the lines. Russia is indiscriminately murdering and killing civilians with drone attacks. We're seeing advanced drone warfare between Ukraine and Russia. We have all this happening while we have this happening. And if Starlink or communications were to be turned off, I know Ukraine does have some redundant systems. I'm not going to say they'd be completely blind, but it would be very, very hurtful for the Ukrainians based on where they are right now and the upper hand that they have based on the attacks in Russia.
All right, Denver Riggleman, former Republican congressman from Virginia and CEO of Rig, thank you so much for joining us. And we'll have more straight ahead here on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio with Senators Catherine Cortez Masto and Tim Scott up next.
This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. Alongside Kailey, Leinz, I'm Joe Matthew. Glad you joined us. If you are just joining us tonight, we've got extensive reporting for you on the feud that burst into public view today, causing billions of dollars in losses for Tesla on Wall Street after the president and Elon Musk shared a series of searing threats, a dramatic unraveling of a political relationship that had Musk come into Washington celebrated by the president, only for Musk to now suggest Trump should be impeached and replaced by Vice President J.D. Vance amid their feud. Now for a look at how Democratic lawmakers are responding to this feud between President Trump and Elon Musk, we turn to Democratic Senator Catherine Cortez Masto of Nevada, who's live on Capitol Hill. Senator, welcome back to Bloomberg TV and radio. We had so many stories we planned to ask you about today, and the political world seems to have shifted under our feet. Noting your experience on Capitol Hill, you've been through a few reconciliation processes. What do you think this does to the outcome of the president's big, beautiful bill?
Well, at the end of the day, this big, beautiful bill is truly an abomination. It's a betrayal. Because don't let this distract you. At the end of the day, what this administration would like to do, and Elon Musk, is to take away health care from 16 million Americans across the country. Medicaid cuts, ACA expansion tax cuts, everything they're talking about would harm Americans. Not only would it take away health care from millions of Americans, and 95,000 in the state of Nevada, by the way, but the ripple effects, even for people who have insurance, who don't even rely on Medicaid, they're going to see their health care costs increase. That's what this reconciliation bill does.
Well, maybe none of this will pass, Senator. Did Elon Musk just detonate the whole process?
Well, listen, the goal should be how we actually help people. How do we help those that are poor get in the middle class? How do we help the middle class keep more money in their pocket, have access to health care, and not transfer all of their hard-earned money to the very top, the wealthiest in this country? That's exactly what Elon Musk and Donald Trump want to do with this reconciliation bill. And I think it is important that we either kill it or we improve upon it. But I don't think there's a way to improve upon it if you're taking away health care from millions of people and you're cutting, having these Medicaid tax cuts.
When we consider the role Elon Musk, up until just days ago, Senator, was playing inside the federal government, trying to smooth it down, being granted access to various systems and various data as part of that effort, are you concerned about what he may have his hands on, or people who worked under him may have their hands on, and how that could be deployed, thinking about the access they had to Treasury payment systems, for example?
Yeah, Kailey, I can tell you, not just so many of us here in Congress, but I think the American public should be concerned that you have a billionaire coming into the federal government, accessing important information that the federal government has, personal information on Americans, and questioning what is he doing with that information? Is he utilizing it for his own benefit? And remember, it's Elon Musk that nobody knows what he is doing as he is in these agencies. It's the people, young people that he's brought in with him, this DOGE troop that he has brought in. Nobody knows what they're doing and what they have done once they've had access to this information and how they're going to utilize it. It's personal information for millions of Americans. It's their privacy, it's their information, and he should not have access. And Donald Trump should have never given it to him. There is a concern, and we don't know. I honestly think, Kailey, we don't know the ramifications yet. We will find out at some point in time, because there's no doubt in my mind Elon Musk is going to use this to his advantage. He's already has all these contracts at the federal government that funds all of his businesses. So we don't know, but we should be very, very concerned. And that's why the oversight. That's why it is important for Congress to use our oversight role. If the Republicans aren't going to do it, Democrats are, and we're going to step up and ask these questions, use our oversight role, and demand answers from this administration.
Well, considering everything you just said, then, should that DOGE crew, as you described it, the DOGE bros, be cleaned out now? There are still Musk loyalists with access to very sensitive information. Should they be fired?
They should be cleaned out. Listen, I question why the Trump administration is including them, and what benefit is Donald Trump getting from this as well. Really, this administration should be focused on the best interests of Americans, the American public. and finding solutions and addressing the needs of this country and Americans who are, some of them who are struggling right now with the high costs that we are seeing. Remember, Donald Trump said day one, when I get in there, I'm going to reduce your household costs. I'm going to reduce those grocery costs. We're going to lower costs for you. He has not done any of that. His policies so far have increased costs for working families. And adding to it, stealing and taking away their private information for whatever reason he's going to do with it, he should be questioned about what's happening here. And the American public rightfully should be outraged.
Well, President Trump hasn't spent his whole day today feuding with Elon Musk in public, Senator. He also spent more than an hour and a half today on the phone with the Chinese President Xi Jinping. And he says what emerged from that conversation was clarity on the path forward on rare earths. Given that you sit on the Energy and Natural Resources Committee, you know the chokehold that China has on rare earths at this point. Do you agree with the president about the importance of sorting out our access to that material specifically?
Well, let me just say this. Absolutely. Are critical minerals key to this country so that we can lead in the technological space that we need here? I couldn't agree more. I sit on Energy and Natural Resources. I am one of the states that has critical minerals. We need to do more. We need to do more extraction and processing and manufacturing and making sure that we are independent from China. But China really controls, over 90% of critical minerals. And so it is essential that we become independent from China. You're asking me a conversation that Donald Trump had. I have no idea the specifics from it. I don't know what came from it. I don't know if we're in a better position in this country to make us critical mineral independent and protect our technology and our future, to make sure that we're energy independent and we can bring that manufacturing here and not be reliant on China. I'll be looking for the specifics in what came from that call. I don't know what came from that call.
Senator, we wanted to ask you about something else President Trump has announced in the past 24 hours, and it has been quite a barrage, but in this case, restricting the entry of travelers to the United States, a travel ban that impacts more than a dozen countries. As someone who represents a state that relies on immigrants for a working economy, whether it's the Las Vegas Strip or anywhere else in Nevada, I wonder your reaction to this move and what it would mean for the economy in your state.
Yeah, I don't understand his reasoning behind the travel ban and how he imposed it. I honestly not sure how it even makes this country safer, but I will say he's doing it as a distraction from this reconciliation package and the harm that he is causing to millions of Americans by taking away their health care and increasing their health care costs. There's no doubt in my mind it's a distraction. He's very good at that. And so we have to keep focused on the impacts that his policies, his economic policies are having in this country. And you talked about one of them. Listen, Nevada, Las Vegas, and Reno, we rely on tourism and trade. It's a main service industry. That's my middle class. That's the hardworking middle class. And his economic policies so far have hurt my industry. We are seeing less travel into the United States, which, by the way, is $1 billion industry. We're seeing a decrease in travel from Canadians. We're seeing a decrease in travel into Nevada. And it's because of his trade policies, his blanket trade policies that really don't make sense. It's his attack on other countries. And so, yeah, this is a concern. And don't just take my word for it in the data coming out of Nevada. I've seen it in the airlines. Listen to what the airlines are saying when they're talking to their shareholders and the challenges they're facing. Not a lot of people now flying on these airlines that are based in tourism or travel. It is a problem.
All right, Democratic Senator Catherine Cortez Masto of Nevada, thank you so much for joining us here on Bloomberg TV and radio. And we're going to continue to follow developments on the Musk-Trump feud later in the hour here on Balance of Power. But of course, it all started, at least in public, on what we just discussed with the senator, the budget reconciliation package, and specifically a dispute over its size as the president is pushing Republicans to pass the measure. And earlier today, we spoke with Republican Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina, who chairs the Senate Banking Committee and also sits on the Finance Committee, about the details of that tax bill. Here's part of our conversation.
I'm really excited about what I heard yesterday at the White House. President Trump was very clear on some of the priorities that I've put in the bill. Number one, I was one of the 4 folks that helped author the TCJA back in 2017. So the ability to protect the taxes for a single mom like the one that raised me, we cut her taxes by 70%. Keeping that instead, that is wonderful good news for us from my perspective. Making sure that the average family continues to benefit from the more than $4,000 that was returned to the average dual income family. Really important from my perspective. And finally, making sure that small businesses, pass-through businesses like the one I used to run, has access to that 20% reduction in paying taxes so that they can hire more people, invest in the future. Those things are locked in there. Other priorities that we talked about at the White House would include making sure that we have the resources to build the wall, and let's protect our military. Okay. These things are there. Finally, Kailey, the most important thing perhaps for inflation comes down when energy production goes up. So that was in the bill as well. We certainly will continue to work on things called spending cuts and savings. This is one area where I think all hands must be on deck so that we continue to look for more savings. Majority Leader Thune has requests from every committee. I'm chairman of the Banking Committee, as you said. Find more cuts. And we've been able to identify billions of dollars of additional cuts that will be hopefully added to the bill when the parliamentarian rules, yes, we can add those to the cuts.
So just quickly, Mr. Chairman, there were a number of things you described as locked in. Would you say Section 899 right now is not locked in?
Well, I would say that we continue to have a serious conversation, a robust conversation about priorities that will be in the bill. And as opposed to going into the ones that are not quite there yet, I like to focus on what I know will be in there, to include things like opportunity zones, hopefully the school choice programs that are not fully, but funded within the bill. We're certainly going to continue to have a conversation about other priorities and, frankly, things that may not make it to the final leg of the journey.
Well, and as you talk about looking for more spending cuts and we consider the deficit impact here, I know the CBO doesn't do dynamic scoring, but including interest interest costs, they say this could add $3 trillion to the debt. And even nonpartisan foundations that do use growth as a factor, like the Tax Foundation, for example, still see almost a $2 trillion deficit impact here. Why should the U.S. Treasury market not be concerned about that?
Well, number one, let's just talk about the CBO, their ability to get it right anytime, frankly, as opposed to this time. They were wrong in 2017, Kailey, by $1.5 trillion. They totally messed up the Inflation Reduction Act by 400%. But let's go back historically, back to the Mellon tax cuts in the 1930s where they got that wrong, or the Kennedy tax cuts in the 1960s, they got that wrong, or the 1980s with the Reagan tax cuts, they got that wrong as well. The one thing we know about CBO is for some reason, they always underestimate the value of tax cuts. In other words, the Laffer curve continues to be true.
You can find our full conversation, there is more, where that came from, with Republican Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina, who chairs the Senate Banking Committee, online or on the terminal. Coming up, we'll bring in this evening's political panel for their reaction to the fallout between President Trump and Elon Musk. It's next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio.
And Elon, because he's not very busy, has agreed to head that task force. Be interesting. If he has the time, that'd be a good one to do it. President Trump has ceded the presidency to Elon Musk. No, that's not happening. But Elon's done an amazing job. Elon can't do and won't do anything without our approval. And we'll give him the approval where appropriate. If there's a conflict, that we won't let him get near it. But he does have a good natural instinct.
I expect to continue to provide advice whenever the president would like advice.
I hope so.
I expect to remain a friend and an advisor and certainly, if there's anything the president wants me to do, I'm at the president's service.
I was very surprised. You saw the words he had for me, the words of, and he hasn't said anything about me that's bad. I'd rather have him criticize me than the bill, because the bill is incredible.
That was just a taste of what was the alliance between President Trump and Elon Musk, one that, of course, really got the political world's attention during the 2024 campaign, which saw Musk give more than $255 million to the Trump election effort, only for him to today lose over $33 billion in net worth as his rapidly devolving rift with the president spills out into public. And for a look more at the implications of this fallout here on Bloomberg TV and radio, we turn to Jennifer Welch of Bloomberg Economics. Jenny, thanks for being with us on Balance of Power. When we consider SpaceX, Starlink, the access that Musk through DOGE has had to federal systems over the last several months, where is the biggest risk of something else going south, shall we say, just like this relationship has gone south?
Well, Kailey, as was discussed earlier in the program, it's really a spectrum of risks, and it's hard to pinpoint one. The U.S. space system remains incredibly dependent on SpaceX. In fact, it is our only way reaching of the ISS at this point in a dependable fashion, given some of the challenges of the Boeing program. We're also increasingly dependent on Starlink, as is some of our key partners, namely Ukraine. And then as far as DOGE goes and access, there's a lot of questions about how much access DOGE had to sensitive government information and systems. And even though those accesses can be cut off, even though remaining DOGE members can be dismissed, you can't delete memories from the human brain. And that information could still be a source of harm in the future. And then there's, of course, Elon's control over one of the most powerful communication platforms in the world, which he has a significant influence on, and his ability to shape narratives and perspectives using that.
Well, that's all comforting, Jenny, knowing that the Doge bros are still at work here in Washington, those who were brought in by Elon Musk, in many cases loyal to him, not vetted. Or does that make them easier to fire if President Trump wants to clean out the Doge?
I assume that many of those contractors are brought in such a way that, yes, they are technically at-will employees that could be dismissed. But again, usually the reason why people go through significant vetting before being given those sorts of accesses is because of this risk of they can preserve knowledge in their memory that could still be a source of harm, even once their direct physical access to those systems or to that information has long since passed. And I think that's a key area of concern is, would any of those individuals want to weaponize that information against this administration?
Yeah. Jennifer Welch at Bloomberg Economics. Thank you so much, Jenny, for your take. Tonight's program could have focused on any number of developing stories. Trump and Xi burying the hatchet with their first phone call, the German chancellor's visit to Washington, Trump's comments on the war in Ukraine, or even the new travel ban we just talked about, signed by the president last night. Of course, though, it was the Elon-Trump feud that could have the power to derail the tax bill and has certainly moved the markets today. With us now, our political panel, Adam Hodge, managing director at Bully Pulpit International, our Democratic strategist, alongside Republican strategist Ashley Davis, partner at S3 Group. Great to see both of you here. If only you knew when we called this morning what we'd be talking about today. Just starting big picture here, Ashley, I know you were up on Capitol Hill today. Is this the distraction that some suggest it is, or a massive crisis for the White House?
Well, I think this actually, in a weird way, helps what's happening with the negotiations in the Senate, because it's taking away from kind of the different groups that want different things in this bill. And what I've been saying this week is we're at this stage that everyone's negotiating this bill in public. So Elon's taking all that heat away. And so Leader Thune can actually get some of these differences hammered out without it being in public. I don't think Elon impacts the bill at the end of the day. I think there's a lot of other things he could impact, but I don't think this, I mean, he's not going to change Rand Paul's mind or Ron Johnson's mind. He's not going to, change other people's minds. So I think that it's the same place as where we were this morning, just with a little drama.
He might not be a sitting U.S. senator or congressman. He doesn't get to vote on this bill, but he does happen to be the wealthiest man in the world with virtually unlimited resources, Adam, who's now up against probably the most powerful man in the world. Should we be afraid of how bad this could go?
I mean, there are a couple people who should be afraid. One, like Elon Musk threatening and alleging Donald Trump is in the Epstein files raises a whole lot of other questions. If also the head of the NRSC and the NRCC also should be a little bit worried. Let's remember.
They want his money still.
They want, and Elon Musk just this year in the Wisconsin Supreme Court race spent $21 million. And he pledged that he was going to spend millions and millions of his own dollars in the midterms. That may have just gone up in smoke today. And I think you have a lot of questions about whether he will continue to support the president politically. I think the other thing, though, that should be people should definitely keep in mind, it reinforces the problem of having these two people at each other's throats. And what it means, Trump threatening to retaliate against SpaceX and Elon's businesses. That's a real threat, and it should be a warning shot to anybody else who gets close to the Trump White House.
Yeah. We actually crunched numbers on the many millions of dollars that Elon Musk put together for the Republican Party during the campaign. It was approaching $300 million. So let's put Starlink aside and SpaceX, the rest of it. Ashley, when it comes to midterms, what does that mean?
Well, he already said, because of his real jobs of his companies, that he was going to pull back a little bit on his political funding. So that was going to happen anyway.
He can make a lot of mess, though, by putting money behind extreme MAGA candidates, making it difficult for mainstream Republicans to win in certain places.
Absolutely.
This could be interesting.
So here's my prediction table. By Monday, there's too much at risk here on both sides. You've got Elon in regards to his shareholders and his boards that are going to be like, this can't happen again, what happened today with the stock market. And then you obviously have the president, that we have very important programs that he has, especially with SpaceX. I mean, there's just too much drama. We just have to stop it. And I think they're going to come out and be like, we made up.
So the reunion tour, you can make a lot of money on a reunion tour.
That's wishful thinking. I mean, there's not enough space in the solar system for these two egos, let alone in Washington, right? And so Ashley, they both should hope so. They should hope to follow your advice, but I'm not sure that they can stomach that. I think the point you raised earlier, though, on how this impacts the bill, I think is key. Thune will be happy to have drama, and anybody else dropping news today, I'm sure, is getting their press releases out, whatever they needed to get out to not cover that. But the pig still stinks on this bill, right? I mean, there's a lot of bad stuff, and Catherine Cortez Masto earlier laid out why I think Democrats really have a lot of ammunition to go after the bill, and I think that will only continue.
Well, so when we consider then the fate of this bill, Ashley, I know you think ultimately it's going to be fine, but the voices who agree with Elon Musk here, are they going to be drowned out? Can we brush them aside as easily as we can say, okay, Musk, you're not a senator, you don't actually have skin in this game?
No, I think you have very serious senators. Obviously, we all know that Rand Paul is not going to vote for this because it's going to carry the debt ceiling. I mean, it has to carry the debt ceiling. So you then have Ron Johnson, maybe Rick Scott. I think Josh Hawley's issues are starting to get a little better. I think he's getting a little more comfortable with where he was on Medicaid. So Ron Johnson has a very strong belief in the budget and going back to pre-COVID numbers. And so he's going to try to get as much as he can out of this bill because he truly believes it, and he truly believes it's a problem with the United States. So, but listen, we can lose 3. So we don't know where Susan Collins and Murkowski are. Those are the other 2. But I don't think any Republican is going to let taxes be right.
And I think that's the one thing that I think we should all remember. If there's one thing that Republicans they've done 2 things really in the last 25 years in policy. They've passed tax cuts and they created the DHS. Beyond that, there's not really much other policy that they've done in the last 25 years. And so I think they will ultimately get this bill across the finish line because that's the one thing Republicans do is pass tax cuts.
Does this slow it down, though, to the point where you can't meet a July deadline?
Can I just answer this?
Yes.
We can't have it slow down because of this. I mean, the longer this bill hangs out,
the worse it gets.
The worse it gets. Yeah. I mean, if we have July 4th recess, people go home for break. I mean, it's just, he has to get, in my opinion, he has to get it done as soon as possible.
Time is the enemy of deals.
It's our enemy right now, so we have to end our political panel here. Adam Hodge and Ashley Davis, thank you both so much for joining us. And for more coverage of the bill, of this feud exploding into public view, check out the Washington Edition newsletter on the terminal and online.
Might take you a while to catch up. Thanks for joining on Balance of Power. This is Bloomberg.